it's Rogowy here, and it's time for another tutorial. And today we are looking at InDesign, Adobe InDesign, and this is really just the first part of a series of videos meant to get a beginner sort of person starting out in InDesign at least to a point where they're comfortable with building things within the program. So I'm going to go over some of the basics here, stuff that you need to know in order to get going with InDesign. InDesign is this icon down here. It says ID. It's kind of a purplish color. It is a page layout software, and basically it's used for multi-page documents and for things like magazines, books, anything that's multiple pages is best suited for InDesign. And it's really a program where all your work kind of comes together. So if you know Photoshop, if you know Illustrator, InDesign is the program where all of that comes together to make a finished piece. So we're going to go to File, New, Document. We're going to get this window that pops up. Now if you look at this, you will notice that currently, right now down here where you see the page size, it is set to picas. And unless you know the pica system, it can be really confusing for somebody starting out. So I'm going to actually hit cancel, and I'm going to go up to the InDesign menu and go to Preferences, Units and Increments, and I'm going to change that to inches. And I'm going to hit OK. Now one strange thing you'll notice is if I go File, New again, New Document, oh, it worked this time. Sometimes you'll come in here and it'll be still in picas, and what you need to do is quit the program, come back in, and it'll be fixed up. In the New Document window, we have some new options that we don't see in Illustrator and in Photoshop. First one being number of pages. All right, if we're making a big document, a big book, we put in the number of pages here. We got facing pages, which basically tells the program how are the pages going to sit next to each other. Are they going to sit side by side? Are they going to sit as single pages? Leave that one on for now. The page size for this document we're going to have at 8.5 by 11, and the orientation is going to be portrait. One thing I should mention is that because InDesign has now added all sorts of interactivity features for mobile devices and for smartphones and that sort of thing, under intent, you can choose web and mobile so that you can make interactive documents as well, and those we'll look at later on. You got columns down here, so the number of columns in your design, the margins, how far from the edge is your design going to be. I'm going to change this to 0.25. And down here, easy to miss, we've got bleed and slug, and I'm going to click this little arrow here. And in the bleed section, I'm going to put 0.125, which is the standard amount of bleed required for a document. Now, if you don't know what bleed is basically anytime a graphic or text or color touches the edge of your page, you always bleed it past the edge of the page so that when it cuts, it looks like it goes off. Hopefully that makes sense. Look up print bleed definition if you're not sure. And hit OK. Now, we come into this new document in InDesign. You can see that it looks a lot like Illustrator. And the nice thing about it being part of the Adobe package is that all the shortcuts are going to work the same as the other programs. I'm going to quickly just go over some of the tools on the left-hand side. I'm not going to go through them all, but I'm going to go through some of the ones that you need to know. First of all, the selection tool. Same tool that you're going to have in other programs, selects and moves objects. Direct selection tool. Again, same as Photoshop and Illustrator. Actually, sorry, still same as Illustrator more than Photoshop. Allows you to select individual points or parts of an object. Going to skip page tool, going to skip gap tool, going to skip this one, content collector. Type tool, basically exactly as it sounds, allows you to make type. Line tool allows you to make lines from one point to another. Pen tool, you can create vector objects just like in Illustrator. Pencil tool is kind of a free-form sort of tool. One new one here that you're going to see is the frame tool, and if we click on here we can see different types of frames. One thing that's important to mention is that InDesign will only link to work that you've created, meaning that it doesn't store a copy inside unless you tell it to embed it. So everything is handled within frames. We're going to get into that more right away. Rectangle tool, ellipse tool, polygon tool, these allow you to make primitive shapes within InDesign. The rest I'm going to skip for now. Some of these you may recognize. The colors down at the bottom you're going to recognize the same as Photoshop and Illustrator. If you haven't used those programs before, I will go into how to set those up shortly. First things first, we want to, I want to talk quickly about the colors that you see on this page. First of all, you got this kind of magenta reddish line on the outside. That is your bleed zone. So if you do have anything that touches the edge of the page, it should go out to at least that zone. The black line is your trim page size, so that's where the page is going to cut. And the purplish line on the inside is your margin. Okay, so if you're trying to keep your page, your text all neat within the page, you go up to the margin and you make sure it's even all the way around. It looks a lot better. All right, so let's get started. I'm going to actually put something together here so you can see how InDesign works and how things can go together. I have a folder here called Trump Time Tutorial, and inside of here I've got some images. In the links folder I've got some fonts that I want to use, and don't worry about this too much, but I'm going to install the barcode font for something that I need later. I'm going to install the font, and it should put it on. There it goes, and I'm going to close this. It's now on the system. Keep in mind, if you are using custom fonts, you do have to package your folders so that all your fonts and all your links and everything that you're using stay together. Like I said, InDesign does not store the files within automatically, so you need to make sure that that travels together with the file. What we're going to do first of all is set up a background. And before I start, I'm going to go to Window, Layers. I'm going to get my layers showing just like in Photoshop and Illustrator. We got our layers. And this is going to be our background layer, so I'm going to call it background. It's good to get in the habit of naming your layers so that you're not confused as to where things are later on. And I'm going to go File, Place, and I'm going to find that folder on the desktop, Trump Time Tutorial, and Links. We're going to put in the background.tiff image. I'm going to say Open. All right, and we're just going to go to line up with the left edge of our bleed, the top left corner, and click, and you'll see that the image doesn't quite fit our document. Now if we were in Illustrator, we would just pull this and it would stretch it to the size that we want. We'd hold shift so that it didn't get distorted. But in InDesign, what this box acts as is a cropping box. It's a frame, and when we scale it, we don't actually change the size of the image within. We only change the size of the box that it's held within. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to adjust the size of this box by grabbing the bottom right corner, and I'm going to stretch it out so that it fills the entire bleed zone. Then what I'm going to do in order to make this image fit, I'm going to go to Object, Fitting, Fit Content, let's do Fill Frame Proportionally. That will fill the background entirely with that picture proportionally, and now it fills up our entire document. Excellent. Next, what I want to do is I'm going to lock this layer because I'm good with that for now. I'm going to make a new layer, and I'm going to call this Blend. And I'm going to say OK. For this one, we're going to do it a little bit different. Watch what happens when I put a picture in that's really huge. File, Place. Good to remember the shortcut Command D. We're going to go with this HD background American flag and hit Open and put it in here. Look how massive it is. It's huge. What happens when we do that? We could sit there scaling it down and fitting putting the box so that it fits, and that's a lot of work. So what we're going to do instead is we're going to take the rectangular frame tool and we're going to make a box. the same size as our bleed area. By the way, I take no credit for the images that are used in this tutorial. I'm simply showing how to use InDesign, and again, I don't take any credit for the images. They were just taken off of Google. Now that I've got this box created, I'm going to go to File, Place, or Command D or Control D if you're on a PC, and I'm going to put HD background American flag into it by having it selected. And you'll see that that goes in there nicely, except for the giant watermark, which doesn't look very good. Let's say we wanted to do some of the effects we might be familiar with in Photoshop, for example. Right now we've got this blend of this, sorry, not this blend, but we got this flag covering up our background. Let's say we wanted the two to come together so that they made one unified image. What I could do is I could select this picture, go to Window, Effects, and in here you'll find the same sort of window that you see in Photoshop. We got our opacity for how transparent that image is, and we've got our blending modes here to change how those layers interact with each other. So I'm going to change this to soft light, and that will nicely merge the two together so that they look like they belong together a little bit better. Now, one thing that a lot of people notice when they first start out on InDesign, they'll ask, why does it look pixelated? Why does the picture not look clear? Well, going back to what I said earlier, InDesign only stores a preview of the file within the InDesign file. If we want to see a high quality display of what we're working on, we go up to View, Display Performance, and change it to high quality. And you'll see what that should do is clean up a lot of those pixelated edges. You need to make sure you're working with images that are high enough quality so that you don't get pixelation. Otherwise, it doesn't really matter whether you turn on high quality or not. It's still going to be pixelated. All right, so this is coming together. We've put two raster images together using a technique very similar to Photoshop. I'm going to lock this layer once again and make a new layer, and this one I'm going to call Logo, and hit OK. By the way, you don't have to make a layer for every single element. I just doing that for the tutorial for organization's sake. Next, what we're going to do is we're going to go File, Place, Command D, and look for the Time Magazine logo.eps. Now this is a vector file. It was created in Illustrator, and basically when I place it in here, it is the Time Magazine logo. Again, this is not an actual Time Magazine cover. I'm just showing a realistic sort of real world example. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to scale this box down so that it's just slightly bigger than the logo. Remember, if I go into the logo, it's not going to change the size. It's going to crop the logo off, and we don't want that. Next, I'm going to take the logo and line it up to the top left corner of the margins on the page. Now, with the logo selected, I'm going to hold Shift and Command, and I'm going to scale the logo proportionally to the other margin, like so. Now, just for the heck of it, let's say we wanted to put in a drop shadow so that this logo stood out a little better against the background. Easily in InDesign, we could select the logo, go to Object, Effects, Drop Shadow, or any other effect that we want, and you get this window that pops up. First thing you want to do is turn on the Preview button in the bottom left corner just to see the shadow that it's adding. Some options here, the blending mode that it's going to apply, the opacity, how dark is the shadow. This angle is super useful. If you click and move it around, what angle is that shadow coming from? The distance, how far is the shadow away from the object that it's on? The offset, the X and Y, how far away from the object in the X and Y coordinates will it go? options like the size of the shadow. How big is the shadow? How much of a blur is there on the shadow? Okay, these are all things we can adjust until we're happy with the result, and we're going to hit OK. We now have the logo in here with this flag and background all kind of coming together nicely. If you want to preview your print, your job, how it's going to print at any time in InDesign, the W key will hide all of the margins and all of the lines, all the bounding boxes, and it'll show you exactly how the piece will look when it prints. I use that all the time, so that's W. Let's lock that layer and let's put a new one in, and let's call it Trump. I apologize to those of you who are not Trump supporters. Sorry, I apologize to people out there who are Trump supporters. I'm going to make fun of him a little bit here. We are going to place the Trump picture in without a box, without anything. I'm going to show you another way that you can transform images that get placed into InDesign. File, Place, Command-D, donaldtrump.psd. Now before we place this one in here, you'll notice that this picture has a transparent background. InDesign can accept many forms of files, and a lot of the transparency that you save within your files will come through into InDesign perfectly, especially if you save them as the Photoshop document format. So if I open that and I click it, you can see that the background has been cut out. It hasn't been cut out too well, but you can see that it's been cut out. And this is a very flattering photo of Mr. Trump here that I think would be great on the cover of Time. And what we'll do is we'll hold Shift and Command like before, and we're just going to scale it up enough so that his head kind of overlaps the Time logo a little bit. All right, I'm gonna make sure that that finger is not in there because it kind of looks weird in the design. Now, one thing I want to show you is if you want to move the picture in very small increments, we could click the box and use the arrow keys on the keyboard to move that, or we can double click the box and affect just the image itself. It turns into a hand. All right, so that way we can move it, or we can even transform the size of the image by holding Shift to keep it proportional. And it's just going to affect the image, all right, similar to how Illustrator allows you to transform. So that's a double click. I'm going to click off of that. Remember that the boxes crop the image, so I'm going to click my Donald Trump frame, and I'm going to pull these edges in so that we don't see that hand going off the edge of the page. So we've got just his face on the cover. Now again, I could adjust this a little bit. I can make it bigger if I want. I could do whatever just to make it fit a little better. There we go. Okay. Press W. Now you got a preview of what it's going to look like when it prints. So there's Trump. Now let's lock that. Let's make another new layer. Again, normally I wouldn't do this many layers, but it's just going to keep me nice and organized. This one, we're going to call it, let's just call it barcode. We might as well put everything on a separate layer. Barcode, okay. File, Place, look for the file called barcode.eps. It's an Illustrator EPS. We're going to say open. We're going to click, and we're going to put it in the bottom left corner. Now let's say we didn't want the barcode going horizontally in the cover of our magazine. Maybe we wanted it vertically. Well, anytime you have an object selected, you have a ton of options up at the top of your window which allow you to transform and make changes to the object that's selected. If you look here in the middle, we have this rotate 90-degree clockwise, which we're going to do, and that will rotate it so that it's vertical, just like that. And I'm going to use that Shift and Command trick to shrink it down a little bit so it fits approximately that big on the page. Once again, if you think it looks better a little bit differently, by all means go for it. It's kind of experimenting with the program here. Next, we're going to look at text. So I'm going to lock the barcode layer. I'm going to make a new layer, and this is going to be called titles. Oops, titles. Okay. Next, I'm going to zoom in on this part of the page. We are going to put a title here in the corner of the page. Now, I'll admit I really don't like the way that InDesign handles text. I like in Illustrator how you can just click, start typing. It makes a text box automatically. In InDesign, it doesn't do that. You have to click the type tool, and you have to actually draw a box first. All right, and I'm going to do that. Once I've done that, I'm going to put 2017 in there. I'm going to highlight the text by clicking and dragging. I'm going to set the color of the text to white. I can do this a bunch of ways. I can use swatches if I want, which is over here, or I can go window swatches, find it that way. Okay, so color swatches. And I can choose paper, which is white. Or I can double click the fill icon and find white in that way as well. Okay, so there's lots of ways to do the same thing. Now here's a little trick. First of all, my default font comes up as Minion Pro. I'm going to set it to bold, Minion Pro bold. And I'm going to just click in the font size part of it here where it says 12 point. By the way, all these options that you see here are available in your character palette in both Photoshop and Illustrator. So that's basically the entire character palette kind of spread out here. Click in here and then just use the up arrow on the keyboard. And what that will allow you to do is scale it up to the size that you want rather than trying to figure it out by putting in point sizes. Keep in mind that if you go bigger than the box, the text will usually disappear, which is not good, obviously. So let's just make it the size of the box, and there we go. Now that we've got it the right size, we're going to just pull the box up. Whoops, I went, oh, okay, that's not bad. Just to take out some of that extra room in the box. Next, we're going to look at the line tool, and that's under the text tool. I'm going to click the line tool, and I'm going to draw a straight line. Now, the way I do that is start drawing a line, then hold Shift, and Shift will draw lines in 45-degree increments. So we want to draw a straight line across under 2017. With that line still selected, we're going to go to the stroke icon. You can tell it's an outline of a block of color. Stroke, swatch. And once again, we could go to swatches or we could double click. We're going to set that line to white and say OK. And then up here, right here, middle of your top bar, you're going to increase the point size to increase the thickness of that line. You can also change the style of the line as well. There's a lot of things you can do, but we're just going to keep it simple here. I went to 5 point. Might be a little too thick, but that's okay. Next, we're going to put a line under that line, and I'm going to just draw a kind of a narrow box underneath. I'm going to type, "Is this the end?" Question mark. I apologize if you are a Trump supporter, but that's the title for this magazine. I'm going to set it to white, and I'm going to increase that font size like this using the up arrow trick until it fits nicely. Now, I have got some kerning issues here. No big deal. It's just for the tutorial. Perhaps I want this to all be moved down a little bit so I can, using the black arrow, the selection arrow, I can select around all three, move it down to where I like, or I can use the arrow keys, whatever I think looks good. Press W. That's how it's going to print. All right. So just to review, because I think we're done with this. As you can tell, it's very easy to use images in InDesign. It's great for combining images. Close cuts like we have around Donald Trump with the background cutout, those come in great. Vector elements like the logo and the barcode and that, they're going to print perfectly because they're vector, no resolution. And text, a lot of the stuff we're familiar with is already here. Okay, so hopefully you can use some of those techniques to get better in InDesign. Start using it, and you'll probably be pleasantly surprised at how nice and easy it is to work with. And there's a lot of great things in this program that you can do that will make some pretty professional looking results. Till next time, thanks for watching.